When working on a piece of antique furniture, or in this case this box, there's always the tantalizing question, and that is, who did it belong to and whose life was it part of? Well, in this case we know for certain, and that is Maude was given it by Myles John Farrelly, her husband, in November 1861. Isn't that amazing? This is the story of the repair and restoration of Maude's box, which seems to have come from India originally. The veneer is saw-cut veneer, which means it's quite thick, and it has a lacquer finish, and that's not our modern lacquer. This is a lacquer which was created using gums when it was done. So that is in really good condition. The box had a missing handle, so we've made a copy of one of those handles, and you'll see it being replaced. You'll see one or two techniques that I'm using here, which can be quite useful. When you're removing nails, for instance, it's often very difficult because they corrode in place. So what I'll use, and you'll see me using a soldering iron. So you heat them up, and when they've been heated, it actually breaks the bond within the wood, so they're easy to take out. You'll see also that there are quite a few little domes missing, and I've replaced those domes with upholstery domes. It's not exactly what would have been there originally, but it would have been too expensive to repair them as per normal. So here I am taking the handle off, which we're going to copy. You can see here this piece of brass is very distorted, and it's been bent backwards and forwards so many times that it becomes brittle. So I'll have to anneal it. That means heating it up and softening it, and then I'll straighten it by beating it gently with a hammer, and then we can reattach. So this is the box as it stands. And go round and round. You can see a bit of veneer needs to be replaced there, which we'll do. And there's where the missing handle would go. Now you can see there's a dedication plate, Maude's dedication plate, and a close-up of the veneer. You can see it's saw-cut veneer, which means it's quite thick. Now here I'm using a cramp, and you see that plastic that will take that curve, that form, which will then hold the veneer in place until it sets. Here I am replacing the missing veneer with some new veneer, taking care to remove all of the glue, because sometimes glue won't stick to glue. Animal glue is pretty good, and it rejuvenates itself. Now I'm using Perspex here, and I'm cramping it down just to hold it in place while it sets. Again, there's that soldering iron, and it helps us take those steel pins out which have corroded in place. Now I'm putting the little domes in there, and you can see there's little washers as well. Fortunately, they're very similar to the washers that were on it. They're kind of raised washers. And I'm refixing that banding now, and then putting the original domes back. So I'm cleaning the stuff from under those little brass pieces, so the brass will sit down comfortably. I'm using a soft hammer there. It's a wooden hammer, so it doesn't do any damage to the brass. I'm going to strip off the lacquer which is on top of the brass, and I'm doing that with paint stripper. The paint stripper I'm using is methylene chloride based, and it's a traditional paint stripper. It really is most unpleasant to use, and it is poisonous. So if you do use this particular type of stripper, make sure you take precautions. Make sure that you've got fresh air. And also wearing gloves, of course. So I'm being careful as I apply the stripper, because it will actually go through the masking tape, and if it does touch the original lacquer, it'll really dissolve it, and then it's a big problem to repair it. Now you can see I'm using wire wool. Well, some people call it steel wool. It's 000 grade, and it actually burnishes the brass. So we're not polishing it. Now this is quite interesting. This is making the new handle using rubber. This comes literally from the rubber tree. It's refined and made into strips just like this. It then goes into a vulcanizer. That heats the rubber sheets, and they dissolve and run very freely all around the repair. So here I am cutting the rubber out with a very sharp knife. It's quite extraordinary how this works. So what we'll be doing is injecting wax into that mould, after of course we've taken the handles out, and the degree of fidelity is unbelievable. It will be exactly the same as the original. Now here I am cleaning up the waxes, and you can see the rubber mould on the desk there. So I'm using a micromotor just to clean the waxes up. And those are the new ones, the new cast handles, and they need to be made old, which is what I've just done now. Here I'm using escutcheon pins, brass escutcheon pins. They've got little domes on them to refix the dedication plates in place. And I'm about to put the new handle, the new replacement handle, into the pommels. Curiously, you actually crush the brass casting. That of course makes it smaller, and then you open it by pulling it open, and then it stays in place. Brass is quite soft, the new cast brass, so it's quite malleable. And here I am cleaning up the dedication plate using wire wool, 000 as I said before, and it gives a nice burnish rather than a shine. If you make it shiny, it never looks right, because this thing is pretty old, 1861, so it needs to have some of its wear, otherwise it looks incongruous. So the technique I'm using here is I'm applying wax with a brush, but using a heat gun. Now these heat guns are very useful. This one's set at 200 degrees C, which is just enough to melt the wax. The wax is made using canuba and beeswax together with a little bit of turps, not a great deal. And the advantage of this is that you can develop quite a big shine relatively easily without several applications of wax. So it's a brown wax, and I've used a spirit stain in the wax to give it its dark colour. If it was light, you'd actually see it dry in the grain, and it really does look unsightly. So I'm taking reasonable amount of care to make sure it all goes into all the little nooks and crannies. And it'll also go into the engravings, so you'll be able to see the dark lines left by the graver. I think I've omitted to show the staining up of the veneer. The veneer needs to be sealed. First of all, you have to stain the veneer so it matches the rest of the job, and then you would seal it. And in this case I've sealed it with shellac and brought it to a reasonably high shine and filled the grain, and then I've used the wax on top of that, and it should blend and not be seen. So there we are with the hot air gun again. Being very careful not to overheat the lacquer, because it will bubble up, it will ruin the lacquer very easily. So you have to only apply just enough heat. And then I'm using a brush. If you use a cloth to clean over that dedication plate, it will catch on all the little bits of brass that are sticking up. So you use a brush to start with. Now here I'm using white glue to actually stick this down. I've made sure that there are no bits on the surface. White glue's okay provided it is the water soluble type. There are types which will cross-link and they're waterproof, and that wouldn't do, because someday, one day down the track, somebody will want to replace the bays that I'd be putting on. The bays, incidentally, you'll see is English billiard table bays. Brushing it out to the very edges. Edges are important. If you take care of the edges, generally you take care of the entire job. It's just very easy to omit doing edges. So I suggest whenever you do this sort of thing, you concentrate on your edges, and the middle for some reason takes care of itself. So down the track, if somebody wanted to remove the bays, as this glue is water soluble, all they do is soak it with water, and the water would dissolve the glue, and then you'd pull off the bays. Originally this will have been animal glue would have been used for the glue. It's an absolutely brilliant glue, but it does involve it does incorporate some problems in its use, whereas white glue is very easy to use and it doesn't do any damage. Provided, of course, it is the water soluble type. It's also compatible with animal glue, which means if you wanted to, you could use this PVA on top of animal glue and it will stick. When you cut your bays, you need to cut it oversize because it does shrink back just a little bit. And obviously if you cut it to exactly the right size, you're going to end up with a piece that is too small. So you make sure that it's all down, and you also make sure, of course, that there's not too much glue on the surface. If there is, it'll come through and that won't be nice. Now this would be left overnight to dry, and then you would cut it. Here I'm using a blade to remove the edge, to cut through the bays at the edge. So it's getting its final polish, and of course here I'm using the cloth, but I'm trying to be a bit careful with it because it will hook up if I'm not careful. So I'm using the brush again because this will spread the wax and apply it evenly, and again it'll be left overnight to dry thoroughly. The lady who owns this box is related to Maude and her husband, and it's been passed down since all that time ago, 1861, through their family. So it's a really nice treasure for her to own. Incidentally, the inside has been treated using a technique called scumpling, where the grain is actually drawn onto a lighter coloured wood. But it's pretty effective. It does look like the original grain, the grain of the rest of the box. But if you can look carefully, you'll see the plates. The lock plate is actually engraved, as are the hinges. It's a very labour-intensive job has been done on this originally. So this is the finished box. Really, really nice thing. Very rich in colour. And there is the handle, the replacement handle. If you're interested in aspects of traditional restoration and conservation, please visit our website at www.arc-services.com.au for downloadable how-to videos and accompanying ebooks.